You're listening to Queer Travel Chat by Two Bad Tourists. Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of Queer Travel Chat. My name is Austin. I am one half of the blogger duo Two Bad Tourists, and joining me as always is David.
Hi guys, I'm here too, and I'm excited for season 3, episode 1.
Yes, so this is our official first episode of season 3. So what's new for season 3 is we are on video. So if you're watching on Facebook, maybe YouTube, LinkedIn, and Twitter, you can see us here, and you'll be able to see our guests here in a minute. And we did a quick preview episode a few weeks ago, but this is the official first episode. So we're super excited to be talking to our guest speaker, Matt Skallerud, who's a longtime friend and colleague of mine. I think we've known each other for about 8 years. And we're going to be talking about the evolution of LGBTQ plus travel over the years, and specifically talking about like the digital revolution, how we consume content, and everything like that. So Matt is a LGBTQ plus marketing expert with 30 years of experience as the president of Peak Media. So he is definitely what you might call a professional gay. So you'll meet him in a few minutes. And so let's
before we get started with Matt, we'll have him on in a couple of minutes, but I thought maybe we could kind of dive into our time working in LGBT travel, because we've been working in LGBTQ travel for the past 10 years. So what do you think, like what sort of evolution have we seen, things that have changed over the past 10 years since we kind of got started in everything in 2012?
I mean, one big thing that changed from when I first started traveling as an adult till when we started traveling was the use of like LGBT apps, so dating apps. Mm-hmm. I know when we did like our 1 year around the world trip, we used that a lot for actually just meeting people, not necessarily to hook up, but to meet people in new cities and to connect and go out and meet locals and stuff like that.
So like just the kind of appearance of the apps and
the fact that they existed and could be used to connect with people in cities where you didn't live.
Yeah, I think definitely the past few years as well, we've noticed DEI coming up a lot more. So businesses are training their staff to kind of be more inclusive to multiple minorities, but to the queer community as well. So like think of like travel agencies and hotels, and I've seen that kind of pop up a lot, right?
Yeah, in the past few years particularly, that's been a big trend, which is great for everyone. More inclusion the better, right?
And ecotourism as well, we've noticed. So it's kind of this idea of if you buy a flight across the Atlantic, well, you can buy credits to get CO2 out of the air. Yeah. which is kind of, I don't think there's necessarily that's considered the best way to be the most eco.
But it is a change that's happened over the
years. People are like starting to think about it and talk about it in ways that we can offset your carbon footprint, right?
Yeah. So we're definitely going to bring on Matt here in a couple of minutes, and he's going to give his insights in more than just a decade, but close to 3 decades of how things have changed. So
before we bring him on, if you like this show, please subscribe to it on Spotify, Apple, Google, or wherever you get your podcasts. Also, be sure to leave a 5-star review if you enjoy our episodes. Plus, if you're watching live on any social media platform, feel free to leave a comment or share the episode with your friends. And you can follow us on social media. We are always at Two Bad Tourists.
So before we get into the interview and bring Matt on, we have just a few words from our first sponsor. And as usual, we did not sell a sponsor spot. I'm responsible for that. That's my fault. So we're just going to hijack the sponsor spot, and we're going to promote one of our own gay group trips. So we're going to talk about our gay group trip to Barcelona and Sitges in May 2024 from the 9th to the 15th. We still have plenty of spots left, and that is a 7-day trip, 6 nights. So we have 4 nights in Barcelona and 2 nights in Sitges, which is our absolute favorite little beach gay destination south of Barcelona.
We
go every summer. So it includes meals and dinners. We'll do some tours, kind of introduce you to the LGBT life in those cities. And David will tell you a bit more about the trip.
Yeah, we also work with a local gay guide there in Barcelona, and he always takes our group on a city center tour and also a visit of Sagrada Familia to visit the inside as well. And then later a modernism Gaudi tour to see the houses that he designed and Park Güell as well. And then later we do a tapas tour in the evening, so you get to know Spanish cuisine, especially tapas, and then a drag show and kind of a night out in Barcelona. And once we get to Sitges, we'll also do a Catalan wine tasting. So a lot is in the itinerary. It's a lot of fun.
Speaking of wine tasting.
That is also Spanish wine.
That is Spanish wine. This is a verdejo.
Okay, so if you want to join us on our Barcelona trip, you can reserve your spot. You can go to twobadtourist.com to learn more, or you can check out the show notes in the description of this episode for the direct link to our Barcelona trip and get your spot.
All right, so I'm going to click this button and I'm going to invite Matt onto the show. Hello, Matt.
Oh, it works.
I am excited to be here. I can't believe I'm your first on the video version of this.
Thank you for joining us.
I couldn't think of anyone better to invite on, our episode 1 for season 3. I mean, you're like the guru of all things social media and live streaming and tech and digital. So I was like, no, it has to be Matt.
And you're also so kind and patient in case we fuck all this up.
Yes.
That's what editing is for.
Yes. 100%.
Yeah, except that we're recording live, so no
live.
edits.
Recording live. We can edit anything we want.
Yeah, that's true.
Well, to start things off, I want to know how you and Austin first met.
Yeah, I feel, it's funny, because I've been doing this, as you said, almost 30 years. So that means that I'm like an old grandpa on this stuff, and things just fall out of my head. But I think it was back in Anaheim with VidCon, because before the days of influencers and all that, there was they were emerging in the world of YouTube, and then there was this huge convention called VidCon. Because I know that's when I met both of you together. But because there was that big event in Orange County, and there was a whole LGBT component to it, and it fell apart at the very last minute. So we all scrambled to pull something together. And I remember the 4 of us, myself, you guys, and my business partner, we went out to dinner, had a great time, and we were joined.
Yeah, I remember that. But is that the first time you guys met? I kind of assumed you had met beforehand.
I think we knew each other online, like so many of our relationships nowadays, because that's the thing. It becomes a gray area. I think we knew each other online pretty well because of Too Bad Tourists, and also there's very few people that are doing blogging and video and so forth that also have kind of a marketing hat on their head, that really have it. And you guys were one of them. So you stood out, which is why I know that we kind of teamed up for that event and went to dinner, because we were very well aligned. We've been aligned way back then, and I would say that we're still aligned now. By the way, the cutest thing you two do is when Austin goes like this, and then you go into the other video. It's actually kind of it's a cool effect.
You can see that.
Yes.
I love my glass of wine.
We're literally in the same room.
We are in the same room, but like we're right next to each other. But we have it's crazy. You wouldn't expect it, but we have like these noise canceling curtains. We have these 2 like giant ring lights. It's a hot mess in here, but this little picture looks great.
Well, I would definitely remember that dinner, and then I think probably the last time we saw you was it in Milan, I guess, for IGLT convention.
Yeah,
I've seen that since, because I was in Puerto Rico. You were there, Matt, right?
That was,
but the 2 of us.
I saw you as well.
Because we're on the circuit. We're on that gay travel.
It's like the gay circuit party, but for like the business professionals, basically.
Yes, small gay world for sure. Well, Matt, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and your background?
Yeah, no, I just I'll make it quick, but just so people know. I mean, I was an engineer once upon a time, which is also one of those reasons Austin and I get along so well.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Because there's so few of us. But I was an engineer who got bored in the lab, and I had a great career job. And long story short, I kind of went into sales while I was working on as an engineer, and the internet came along somewhere along the way, and I thought, oh, this is kind of cool. And I started programming. So I was comfortable with technology, and I loved telling people about how to apply the technology in the real world. And I started creating this website for the gay community. It's called gaywire.com. And I thought everybody would do it, and they didn't. So next thing you know, we kind of like grew, and it just had a life of its own. And it grew into a real company. And there was Gaywire, gay.com, and Planet Out. There was 3 of us back then. But sold it in 2006. And then ever since then, just been continuing to work with companies, always trying to figure out, like, how do I reach the LGBTQ community online? And then the real question is, how do I reach my specific audience online? And that's what I've been doing really ever since.
So tell us a little bit more about like what you're doing now and how you're connecting with the LGBT market and like the different companies and clients and tourism people you're working with.
Yeah, well, because you can imagine back then it was banner ads and email. That was really it. And I really thought banner ads were going to phase out completely in a few years back then, but they didn't, because technology kind of brought them back, but it made them more efficient. But at the end of the day, what we're really doing now is we've kind of grown up and evolved with the technology. So that means that it's moved into a lot of mobile apps and video, of course, but then social media being probably the dominant place that we spend the most time on with clients. And then, so that means that it's moved from, buying display ads and email campaigns to really moving much more over into storytelling, to clients really have a story to tell. And that's what we try to help them with, is that we're going to work with you to tell a story. And then once we figure out what it's going to be and what platform, whether it's going to be video or written, and then where are we going to distribute it, where are we going to get it out there. And so that's what makes it fun, because there's so many different directions and paths that one could take. But at the end of the day, the die seems set where, it's really, most clients now are doing that. And then on top of it, we have this, what's called an I Love Gay network that we've kind of built that sort of takes us back to our media roots. So it's this network on social media that we have over 200 profiles that really focus on different niches, travel and sports, and then, geography like New York and Spain and so forth. So from that, we're able to bring our clients into this kind of this online social media type of, we call it a hybrid, and then also introduce kind of the advertising and marketing components that we do as well. So the whole thing kind of works together.
Is I Love Gay part of Pink Media?
Yeah. I Love Gay is something we started just it was almost by accident. I started to see patterns of how things work together on, because every social media platform has its own algorithm.
Mm-hmm.
Started to see patterns of how things could work together. And that's literally how how it all started. And then we said, wow, let's try 2 profiles. Now let's try 4. And we started to see that there was some real synergy there. And then when you take that analogy and then you engage with others that are not part of your network, but are following you, next thing you know, this magic starts to happen. And
those businesses that are like businesses and initiatives that are started by mistake, I feel like some of the coolest things, like we literally are Too Bad Tourists was like kind of started by mistake, but this was never supposed to be any sort of like business or long-term entity, but here we are 11 years later. I love those stories.
So we always say is throwing spaghetti at the wall.
Yeah, throwing spaghetti at the wall and see what sticks. Yeah.
I don't want to kill too much time, but I would just say that that's where I think we're well aligned, because that's the thing, is that over all these years that I've known you guys, it's evolved so much where, I used to, throwing spaghetti at the wall, I used to think that we'd be managing Facebook ads for a lot of clients, but guess what? They do it all themselves now. Like they don't really, or their agency does it for them, and they don't want somebody like us to intervene. And then agencies are managing so much more of a destination's marketing plans that when somebody like us comes along, they don't see it as a real opportunity or fit, because they almost see us as competing with them for the social media dollars. So it's really quite a challenge to try to navigate through and find. But I would say that this year we spent a lot of time really trying to brainstorm that one.
Well, I want to go back. You said something earlier, which is talking about storytelling. And, that I feel like if there's one thing that we do, like that's literally our job, is like we tell travel stories, whether we're writing a blog post, whether we have a YouTube video, whether we are, creating stuff on Instagram or social media, like it's either telling our travel story or, giving people advice. And I feel like in the travel space, it's one of the great spaces where literally all you have to do to, quote unquote, like promote and do marketing is literally just tell a story. It's the easiest sell, right? Like it's not a hard sell. You have to, go to this website and buy this apparel or buy these things. No, you just tell people about a destination, and like, it's sort of an organic kind of thing. So I want to learn a little bit more about what's been your involvement in, your career of like LGBT tourism specifically. And you can mention also your time with IGLTA as well.
Yeah, I mean, because that's I joined IGLTA because tourism clients were becoming, early on, this was the 90s, they were becoming one of our top our very first advertiser that we also built a website for, because you kind of had to help.
IGLTA is the...
Oh yeah, so IGLTA, for your first-time listener, it's the International LGBTQ Plus Travel Association, which is the network that Matt and I basically connected with. So but I'll turn it back to you, Matt, to continue.
But back then it was tourism was becoming our top advertising base. Our first client was called the Blue Dolphin Hotel out of Fort Lauderdale. They called us, and this kind of lends itself to where we're at today, because they called us and we were only like 6 months into the business, not really even thinking it was a business. And they said, we want to be there, and can you help us put us online and promote us? We did. And within 6 months, I remember the call. He literally said, the owner said, "You have now become our top source of bookings out of everything else we're doing." And he goes, I'm telling you that because I'm telling you that you got, and it was just the internet. The internet was brand new and coming along. And he said, I want to ask that you don't tell any other competitors or tell anybody about this, because, but I know it's not going to work that way, but I thought you should know. And that's the whole thing. And really from that moment forward, it just continued to grow. So we joined IGLTA because we were working more in the travel space. And so I joined just kind of thinking, let's see what this is about. And of course, I like to jump in with both feet quite often. So I went from becoming a member to joining the board in 2003, I believe, and 2002 or 3. And I stayed on for most of that decade and stayed on the board and really kind of tried to help grow it at that time, and also it transitioned a lot, I would say, from being kind of more small business oriented to small and mid-size and corporate, and of course now it's just taken off completely in that way. And so we've just been a part of that, and that's in the world, in that whole world, that we've all continued to evolve with the world of travel and helping destinations figure out how do you reach LGBT travelers.
Yeah, so well, let's dive into that kind of the whole topic of the episode is, so what are kind of the main milestones and how have you seen travel change for the LGBT community throughout your years working in the industry? I mean, pre-internet to now, social media being the main thing.
90s, 2000s, 2010s, 2020s.
Well, when I joined the board, it's kind of funny. It's hard to imagine now, but I was vilified. Literally, I had to go up on stage back then and try to, give a little speech and do all that. And there was a lot of travel agents that were members of IGLTA, and they were quite angry with me. They weren't really angry with me personally, but they were, and it became actually a little ugly and quite vocal. But it was just because the internet was doing such damage to their business, and they were very upset with anybody talking about the internet in the LGBT travel world. But I continued on, and in spite of that, and of course, as we know, things are where they're at today. And so really that's been we've kind of gone through those waves over certain periods of time. I actually had the exact same thing happen a few years later when I was in Canada and up on stage talking about LGBT internet online opportunities, and bar owners were really upset because, as you know, like in Toronto and certain areas, there used to be gay villages, and those things have very much changed and in many ways faded away. And the bar owners were very upset. They were upset at the internet and Grindr and everything that was taking their people.
Just taking away like the gayborhoods because people are meeting online now. They don't need to have these like communal spaces. I didn't know that's kind of a thing.
I mean, Canada. I feel like this is sort of, as any sort of business owner, anytime there is a disruptive anything, whether it's a technology or, something that kind of comes to market, any business owner that's not quick enough to adapt or not willing to adapt, they might suffer, right? But it's interesting because you mentioned travel agents. I feel like there's like maybe back in that day where the internet was kind of taking over their business, like that was a big struggle for travel agents. But now I see that travel agents are thriving more than ever, the ones who have adapted to online and digital, because now there is so much information that people are lost, right? And they're like, oh my God, I need a person who I trust to give me good advice. And now travel agents have kind of come back to the scene, and those who've embraced, technology are acting as, really advisors and helping people, sift through all the information that's online.
But I also understand like that was my fear with like our blog as well, and why I didn't want to just fully dive into Two Bed Tourists as just the blog, because I'm like, well, what if people aren't using travel blogs in 10 years? Who knows? Like, this is what is a good way to find information now, but since we have kind of like diversified much, and
every year that goes by, we're throwing new spaghetti at the wall.
Now I'm like, okay, I feel better because if one thing changes, we've got another thing we can dive into.
Yeah,
that's true. And I feel like, Matt, like you and I connect on like, we create these businesses and we do these things, and at the end of the day, it's just sort of following the technology and trends, and you have to adapt, right? And that's the only way you can survive.
But it's been changing pretty rapidly, and that's where I would, I'm not afraid to say that directions that we thought were going to work were working, but for a much shorter period of time than I thought. And so, but it was very different than back in those 90s and early 2000s, where the internet just sort of grew and grew very methodically. It was much easier to grow the business down a certain path then, and as it is now. That's where I was saying, like, we feel pretty good that things are coming together where it is easier now to be able to explain to clients. Really, it's content for us. What we do is content marketing with kind of a dose of adding a media company layer on top of it. But what we're doing is we're navigating that space. Can't even answer the question that we started with. We're navigating that space that's changed, because now not only do you have influencers out there and a wide variety of different media. Back in the day, it used to be just specifically LGBT media that were started in print and they moved to online. But then you kind of had bloggers, and you had a wide variety of different websites that were all dedicated to LGBT topics. And then now you've got so much user generated content that everybody's trying to clamor for attention. And actually, we're like the anti-influencers sometimes, because I spend the least amount of time on Instagram, but everyone loves Instagram. And Instagram is a very, very busy place because everyone's jumping all over themselves to try to stand out and get in front. And I will tell you that 1 out of 2 or 3 posts on my Instagram feed are sponsored. And they're not sponsored by corporate. They're sponsored by sometimes just people that just want more followers at that moment in time. So it's fascinating how it's really changed. And so our job is to navigate through all of that and still try to be able to succeed.
So talking about change, like how have you seen this whole digital revolution that started in the 90s impact travel, like in the way that people discover what they want to do and how they book? Like, what's your insights on that?
Well, that's where, especially when you use the word discover, that's a perfect word. It's very gay. It's very active or passive, which is a very, more in the Latin world. And of course, it's tops and bottoms. And what I say by that, Google's a top, and people are very active when they're on Google. When they're on Google, they're looking for something. And so when you just focus on that aspect of how things have changed on the digital side, think about, it was a big deal when Google started to really integrate airline technology. So now they have Google Flights. And Google Flights is extremely powerful for me as a consumer when I'm trying to figure out just even booking a flight before I even go to my favorite airlines. But all that technology, whether it was Expedia and also so forth, people oftentimes kind of know what they're looking for, while social has become such a dominant part, and that's where all the influencers are at, and so much of that work is over there. But that's very passive. So that's the direction where people aren't really looking for anything specific. They're just kind of like checking out things on a daily basis. And all of a sudden you start to see influencers representing a destination or destinations and so many other hotels and so forth going direct and just putting content out there and trying to navigate and figure out, like, how can, they're thinking, how can I create content that people are going to want to like and engage with, and then ultimately come to my destination. And so you can imagine there's so many right answers and all that. So many, whether they use video or photos or written word. And so it gives life to all of us being able to participate because there's a lot of opportunities there.
I remember I've been to a number of your presentations that you've done at our little gay circuit, professional gay conferences. And one of the things I always remember is your presentation where you're talking about like the 90s when the internet came out and people used to like bookmark websites. So like in the 90s, when you found a website that had good information that you wanted, this was before search engines, right?
Yeah.
I don't know how you found the website the first time, but you found it. And then you're like, all right, I'm going to go back to this website. So you bookmarked it, right? So like what was the evolution from, the internet came out, there was no search engine, so then search engine, so then social, like what does that look like now we're in 2023?
It's been fun. But even that's the whole thing. If you look back then, you felt really fortunate you found something. And let me tell you, when Netscape first came out, that was life-changing. Netscape was a big deal because now you've got this really beefy browser that can do so many things. But it was that whole idea that all this, especially back then, all this stuff was fleeting, and you would always try to be able to find a way to, like, how do I trace myself back? So the big difference isn't even so much how you found things, because yes, it went from bookmarking to kind of search dominant, and now they search and social really have to share that space. But it really was the whole idea that when you created a website, Too Bad Tourists or any site, back then your goal was to create the most engaging front page that walked them through. It's almost like you took them by the hand and walked them through the site. Back then, you can keep people on your website for 30 minutes to an hour.
Oh my God.
And your page views were like, if you had one person there, the average page views was always like a minimum of 10, and people would be there. And so the banner ad market was very high then, because a simple website with 100,000 people coming to it in a month could have millions and millions of banner ad impressions. That was the business. And then I realized when I sat down with some business owners, even just like 10 years ago or more, and I was explaining, I said, that doesn't work that way anymore, right? And they're like, what are you talking about? I said, yeah, everybody universally gets pretty much like 1 point something page views per user, which others are saying, like, what does that mean? That's too geeky. But all it means is that people go to your site and then they get what they want and they bounce out. They go for about 1 point something page views, and they usually stick around for about 30 seconds.
Yeah.
It's a far cry from what it used to be. Now, if you can keep them for a minute, 2 minutes, if you can keep them for 2 or 3 page views, you're doing something really well. Right. But when you think about that, that is the core. That is the core of the big change that not everyone has really fully embraced, that means that the source of traffic is not from your front page, walking them through the site to all the things. It means it's coming from somewhere else. They found it through search, or they found it through social, and they went in, they got what they wanted, and they're out. And how did you, as a media company or as a blogger or whatever, how did you benefit from that short interaction?
When you were talking about like passive versus active, then with that knowledge, what do you do with that? If people are actively looking on Google and that's active, or people are like passively finding things on social media. So you have that knowledge. Now, what do you do with that as a business? Do you have to kind of like attack
SEO.
both sides?
No, it's all about SEO. That's where SEO is important. It's
But
hard
for the active, that's for the Google searches.
Yeah.
But then, I mean, but do you also want to incorporate the passive part of that as well?
Oh yeah, well, I think most do. So you want to, but every business is different. Some businesses are really only viable where somebody's searching for something at that moment. So it doesn't really make sense. Like the whole passive side doesn't work for everyone. And so the active, that's why they buy so many Google text ads. And that's why Google ads are so expensive that most of us, I stopped doing it myself. It just got so expensive. You're spending like $3-4 a click. And you got to be able to convert a high percentage of those, or otherwise you're spending a lot of money. And so social has really also upped the ante, where if you're going to be paying Facebook for targeting, you're also now paying a pretty good sum, but you're not paying as much as on Google. And so the trick is, how do you get as much as you can for free? And so, or we like to use all the word organic.
Yeah.
So how much can you get organically through search and social? And I think that's the trick.
So where do you see things going in the future? That's kind of what I'm really curious about. Like, what are the trends happening? Like, what do you imagine in, next year, 5 years from now, 10 years from now?
It's hard to go too far out because, as you can imagine, because smart as I ever like to think I am, I'm never smart.
Who knows what's going to come, right? Things come and go so quickly.
But it's, I think just overall, if you really want to look at it from a big picture point of view, as far as what works and what doesn't, because as you're starting to see, like, Facebook, regardless of what people say, and, you have to kind of like tune a lot out. But in general, most of us know that Facebook has become kind of, there's a staleness to it, and it's reported on in a wide variety of different ways. And it's still viable, and a lot of people still use it. Change doesn't happen overnight for these, even though the technology is changing, the change in the way people use it doesn't change overnight. So Facebook's still going to be steady for a while, but at the end of the day, we know that it's really leaning more towards video and short form video. And you got to catch people's attention in that video within those first few seconds, or they're not going to stick around to figure out what your video might be about. And so it's a very strong rethink as far as following the trends of how people's habits are changing. And I always say short form, if you do it right, even for this video, like if this video is going to be 45 minutes long, short form little clips that catch their attention right away, make them go, oh, this looks kind of cool. Yeah. And then they click on it to watch the full. That's the trick for where we're at nowadays.
It's interesting you said that, because 3 days ago, we just purchased a subscription to a software package, which you input a link to your YouTube video. So it could be this podcast, and then it automatically spits out like 30 or 60-second blurbs, and it determines with AI technology, like what are the most interesting parts. And then you can use that to share on TikTok or Instagram or Facebook, like in short form.
I'm just going to choose your most salacious comment though, and clip that, and then use that to publicize in context.
I think if we make our voice like really surprised, like, oh my God, it'll think that's the important part.
No, but of course, I mean, that's the way to go for sure.
This is the second time in a week that somebody's told me that exactly what you said, that somebody that does a show like this is using AI to create 30 to 60 clips. That's probably, and for the moment, starting 2024, that's probably the hot ticket for people creating these shows.
Well, I'd really like to learn a little bit more about like your travel habits and trends. Like you talked a little bit about using Google Flights. Like, what other sorts of like digital technology and apps do you use when you travel or plan or book?
Yeah, I'm a really bad one for that. I don't use much. I do it all myself completely, and then I pretty much use Google for my initial research on the flight. And when it comes to a hotel, I'll see, like, so let's just say it's a convention. I'll look and see, like, what's the host hotel convention rate? And then I'll pop over to the good old Hotwire and see, like, oh, what are those rates going on in that area? And I'm not averse to using Hotwire and being like half a mile away and walking. So I have a weird...
Hotwire is your meta search for hotels then.
Makes me sound old, doesn't it?
I think I use Kayak. What do you use?
For flights, I use Google Flights.
What about for hotels?
Hotels, I use you and Stevie to get discounts. And I ask you, where can we get a discount? Honestly.
Yep. And
honestly, I go Airbnb or
I
just ask you.
But it's really strange, and you're the same. Like, I think most of us that are like, I don't know, this technology is kind of second nature for me, and so I just jump in, and the answers are really quick and easy to get. Yeah. And even when I'm there, the only thing I'm using on a regular full-time basis is Google Maps, because I just crank that out, figure out where I'm going to go. I let it kind of walk me along. And those simple technologies, and I know I use the word Google a lot, but they really have found a way to become a huge part of my life.
Oh yeah.
And
Yeah.
because all that other stuff is secondary, everything else, if I got 15 minutes to kill and I'm sitting there somewhere, and then I'll probably open TikTok and fool around, but has nothing to do with travel planning. It's just because I have a little free time, and TikTok can really suck up that free time really quickly for me.
Yeah, it does a really good job, that fucking algorithm.
It does. It's like I try not to be on it.
What about like travel destinations? Do you have any, like we mentioned earlier, how Sitges is one of our favorite sort of LGBT travel destinations. Do you have any favorites that are up on top of your list?
I should, but anytime anybody's ever asked me that, I'm not the very, very worst person for favorites. I always like to say, well, they're all different and special in their own way, but especially at this point, right now I would just say right now we're very much focused on Asia, but it's also because the moment IGLTA had the date set for Japan for next year, my husband was on it saying, "Tell me those dates," and he's already putting the plans together because he loves Japan, and so we're gonna make a big trip out of it.
Heck yeah.
I already booked my plane tickets, and I found a really good. Yeah, speaking of, I think I must have Googled or kayaked, or I don't know what, but I found a really good price flight from Madrid to Seoul, South Korea, and then it's only like an hour and a half flight from Japan to South Korea. So that's kind of how I made a really long flight like to that destination. I'm going to spend a couple extra days there, and then
you should. It's going to be really good. And a lot of people are using Seoul as I think Korean Air, but I'm hearing that more often too. They must have some really good rates, but because it's the same thing next week. This also tells you who I've married. His friends say, "Oh, we're going to be in Bangkok for the New Year's, and you should join us." Kind of flippantly, you can't give him a challenge like that because he's like, "I'm going to make that happen."
In Thailand, come meet us.
So we're going to. So next, right day after Christmas, we're going to go to Singapore because we've never been to Singapore together, and then from there we're just going to pop over to Bangkok and ring in the New Year up there and stay for a few days.
Oh, so that's going to be a great trip.
That's cool. Yeah. And it'll be great to get out of the cold. That'll be nice.
No, I know. So I'm very much looking forward to that. And then we're back in action for January.
Matt, work-wise, do you have any other kind of new opportunities or projects that you're working on that are coming up?
Yeah, no, it's like I was saying, everything just has kind of come together nicely. Like especially in the world of tourism, we're really happy that we're working with Palm Springs again, and we're able to kind of help them. Just it's all about. One of the things we do is we find a lot of stories with an LGBT angle to them related to Palm Springs, and then we get them out there through our various channels. We throw advertising at it. And so that whole formula as far as content, whether we monitor and find it or whether it's provided to us from influencers, there's so many different ways we can get content and then getting it out there in the right places. It really seems to have kind of found a nice, it's in a strong position for next year. And that's really our big thing is we're just going to continually try to find better ways to tell that story so that more and more clients understand what we're doing and see how that's going to help them. And hopefully we become very easy to understand, simplify our website and keep going from there.
Excellent. How big is your team?
It's actually literally just, there's two of us as far as primary, myself and Fabrice, my business partner.
Okay.
And then right now on top of that, we have about 8 others. So it's a total of 10 that are between part-time and full-time and do a lot of the social media postings and mostly that, but also some of the management of some of our social media profiles as well, writing and so forth. So nobody in sales or administration, just purely kind of support.
All right, fantastic.
And all right, so we're wrapping up here. Is there any question that you wish we would have asked you, or maybe something that you want to share with the audience? I don't know.
Did you see my shirt? This is the first time.
Yeah, see,
that's as crazy as I get. Well,
and I was saying before we started the recording, like your shirt is popping because the color behind you in your photo, like, they match. So
in fact, it almost looks like a little head thing. So
at the beginning, before we started recording, you mentioned your show. I don't know much about your show.
Oh yeah. And it's I Love Gay Today, and it was built or it just started the same way as like what you all are doing. It was 2020 and I got bored. So I started, but I also kind of always had in my mind that I wanted to do something like that. So we created this show where I just want to interview different leaders in the LGBT space, especially on the business side. And it kind of has a life of its own. And we're really close to now having recorded 500 interviews now. And
Wow, that's a huge
it's
accomplishment.
insane. And I can't shut it off now because like I did 2 shows. I'm doing a show right after this, and it's the publicist. They find me. They love the show because the show's short format. It's 10 minutes or under, and I let them tell their story. It's like really what I'm as an interview. I'm just trying to help them along so that they can tell their story about something. And a lot of times there's like a new film or a new book or whatever it is. But the person I interviewed this morning is an LGBT activist out of Laos, if I'm saying it right. And and that's just he's really proactive and very visible out there. And those are the sort of stories that I enjoy, just trying to help do my part to bring them further to light.
Excellent. How can people find it?
Oh, that's ilovegay.today.
Excellent.
Perfect.
Yeah,
And
so
I'm sure
good.
it's on every social profile that you have.
It is.
It pops up in our feed.
It's everywhere.
It's content that I want to hopefully I'd say you have to be living under a rock, but no, that's not true. It's just anybody who's following certain things that we do. Yeah, we've got a good audience for that. And and then, like I said, we're going to hit 500 soon, so we're going to cross over in that crazy side.
Cool.
Excellent. That's a great milestone.
Congratulations for that.
Thank you.
So like just wrapping up here, you actually, I think you might have said what your next trip is, but where are you traveling to next? We always like to ask that question.
Yeah, it really is. Next week, Singapore and Bangkok, and then actually tomorrow we're going to DC for a few days, which is
there is.
There's a little bit of
within these 5 or like 1
See,
week,
we invited you on this travel show for
7 days. You have a trip, but within that time, you have another one.
Yeah, we were in New York for 3 days. Packed it up with a lot of Broadway, and now we're going to be in DC. And so I don't even consider those anymore, even though like DC is almost 4 hours away. But yeah, it'll just be a nice little.
Well, what Broadway did you see? What show? What stuck out of the 3?
Well, Spamalot. We saw Spamalot, and that was my first time seeing Spamalot. So we saw that, and now all I do is sing in my head. Always look on the bright side of life.
I haven't seen it. I just saw yesterday with my boyfriend here in Madrid. We went to the Book of Mormon.
Ah, yes, I've seen that. We're going to see it again. In fact, in a couple months because we're bringing other family members to see that. Yeah, it's really a good one.
I told Austin he needs to take his boyfriend Juan to go see it because it's worth it.
Because you shot it, turned it off.
Just in case.
Like a lie.
Well, Matt, thank you so much for joining us. I'm glad that you finally made it. We had 2 seasons of our podcast. We didn't get you on them, but we're finally here on season 3. But I'm glad we waited because now we got you on the video, and you're like, a pro and expert in this video space. So it's just kind of like the best, like natural organic fit. So thanks so much.
Yeah, thank you so much for taking the time.
Absolutely. Anything for you guys.
Thanks, Matt.
All right, Matt.
See you in Japan.
Yeah, enjoy your travels. We'll definitely see you in Japan, and take care. Thanks so much.
Thanks.
Bye. Okay. Well, before we call it a day, let's do a little kind of wrap up. I think we want to plug one more trip, right?
Yeah, so let's talk about actually 2 trips. Let's talk about our gay group trips on Virgin Voyages, which are this coming summer in 2024.
Yeah, we do 2 a year. It's kind of our rhythm now. So our first one we're going to do is our Greece one. So we're going to be doing Greece and Croatia. So the stops are Athens, Dubrovnik, Split, and then Kotor,
which is in Montenegro.
Which is actually Montenegro. Corfu, which is a Greek island, and then back to Athens. So June 16th to the 23rd will be that first one.
Yep. And then our second trip coming up in October from the 6th through the 13th, 2024 as well. That does Spain, France, and Italy. So it's Barcelona, Toulon. I shouldn't have committed to saying all these names because I can't pronounce them.
Do you realize I gave you those names because I can't say them?
Marina de Carrara and Civita Chicha, which is basically like
entry to
Rome, the port, and then Ibiza and Barcelona. I regret it because when we practiced this, I just skipped those words.
I set you up. So anyway, what you can look forward to on these tours is, or on these cruises, is their 7 nights with Virgin Voyages, who we absolutely love. They're very LGBT friendly. It's adults only, even better, no kids. There's free Wi-Fi on board. All meals are included. They have 6 kind of nicer dining restaurants as well. Wonderful entertainment. There's a drag queen on board, so there's drag shows. We always include a private cocktail party for our own group as well. Anything I'm missing?
No, definitely join us. We have 2 a year. We did 2 last year. They're super popular. We're really happy to work with Virgin Voyages. It's kind of just the perfect fit. So if you're interested, check out our website, twobadtourist.com, or check the show notes, the description in the show notes to learn more about either of these trips and reserve your spot.
Yeah, and thank you guys so much for listening. If you're watching on Facebook or YouTube, thank you for tuning in. We appreciate it. We're happy to be back for season 3, episode 1. If you like the show, please subscribe to it on Spotify, Apple, Google, or wherever you get your podcasts.
You were about to say Colin, weren't you?
I don't
Which
think
we did
so.
for 2 years.
No, don't.
Okay.
Wait, no, I'm advertising
Calling him out.
anymore. Shh, they're out. Be sure to leave a 5-star review if you enjoyed the episode. It really helps us out. And if you're watching live on any social media platform, feel free to leave a comment or share the episode with your friends. You can follow us on social media. We are always at 2BadTourists. And lastly, please feel free to leave a comment about what you want to hear more of. We are always looking for more ideas and happy to get some feedback.
Yes, and speaking of new ideas, new episodes, just what to expect coming up here in season 3, our next episode is going to be on Miami. So David and I are doing a trip of South Florida in January. So we're doing Miami, Key West, and then we're actually doing a Virgin Voyages cruise of the Caribbean. So during that trip, we're going to be visiting some different parts of Miami and visiting local gay-owned businesses and things like that. So we should be publishing that episode. We have a little bit of a break, but it'll be the beginning of February.
Yep, that sounds about right. So we will be celebrating the New Year then in
Florida, in Fort Lauderdale, actually.
Yeah, that's exciting.
That's where we'll be.
That's where we're traveling to next, I guess, right?
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you everyone for listening. Happy holidays to everyone who's celebrating, and
happy New Year. And we'll be back for episode 2 in about February.
Yeah. Take care. Bye.
Bye. Ciao.